So hey guys, welcome back to my channel again. Today we have a special guest with us, Joyce. And Joyce has a YouTube channel of her own as well. So would you like to briefly introduce your channel? Even though Joyce has actually been on my channel a few times, but just for people who are newcomers.
Yeah, I recently interviewed Tori and a bunch of female INFJs, so you can check that out. And so, hi, my name is Joyce, and I have a YouTube channel where the series is called Type Talks, and it's basically where I interview people of the 16 types to hear their stories behind how it's like to be their personality type from their own words.
Yeah, so we both do content on psychology, on MBTI, and focusing on personal experiences as well as the cognitive functions of the different personality types. So as usual, fresh announcements from my channel. You can get the personality themed merchandise from the link in the description box below, and they are all really affordable. The purpose of it is really for people to wear their personality with pride and to celebrate individuality. And today we are going to be talking about why typology is so important and even revolutionary. And I don't use the word lightly because I do believe that when typology is used in the right way, when people actually apply it in a positive way, it can actually make a lot of really big changes to how people understand other people and how they understand themselves and how they perceive things happening in society. So that's actually why I started the channel in the first place. Despite not being comfortable at first with like the whole appearing on video thing, but I just thought that type is like a really important element to for us to really discover ourselves and understand other people. So I would like to ask Joyce about what do you think? How do you think type has helped people? We can talk about the personal level first because I feel like change always starts from the personal. I used to think that it's the other way around, but actually we influence change based on our own behavior first. So pretty much it is like from the personal to societal since it's made out of individuals anyway. So yeah, Joyce, what do you think? How do you think type can change an individual?
Yeah, I think that type can change an individual through helping us accept others and ourselves more. And so when we know our type, we know that we're not crazy. It's okay to be the way that we are, and that you don't have to beat yourself up or feel shame for things that are natural. And so it takes away unnecessary shame, it takes away unnecessary self hate, and it helps you see that, oh, I'm not wrong because I'm just different than others. Of course, that's not to say that you should never improve. You should totally improve, but you should also be able to love yourself as you are. And I feel like type gives us vocabulary where we're able to pinpoint our personality cores, and so that we can hug them instead of harm them. Because sometimes the culture around us can tell us we're supposed to be different, and sometimes that peer pressure can cause us to shame ourselves. There's no baby that knows that they should feel shame. It's typically adults or culture around them that teaches them shame. And then, so basically, not liking parts of yourself is learned from life. It's not something that you're born with. And so, type is a way of unlearning all of that baggage that you have. And so, type gives you ownership over your own confidence in some sort of way too, because it's like, this is who I am. And you can kind of like yourself more unapologetically from that, because you're like, oh, it's natural. And so it gives you a sense of okayness, because one of the primary thieves of joy is comparison. You know,
Mm,
people can really feel down in their lives or these negative emotions because we compare ourselves. But when we realize that, oh, my type is different than the types around me, I don't have to be any other type. I can just work with the strengths that I already have. So instead of running upstream or running up a mountain, you're going downhill. And so you're going down the path of least resistance. You're not fighting yourself. And so a lot of pain in people's lives come from people being their own obstacles, people being their own
Yes.
form of resistance. And so when you realize type, you're not constantly trying to cure things that are natural. It's almost like when you figure out that your dominant hand is your left hand, but you're in a time period where they don't really respect left-handed people. There was actually like a point in time where people would force left-handed people to write with their right hand, and that can, some people can do it, they can start writing with their right hand, but for other people you're actually torturing them in some way, and you're not working with the gifts that they already have. Whereas if you knew that, oh, you know, it's okay for some people to use a different hand than you, then you stop trying to force your way into changing someone. And
Yeah.
so type is also very good to alleviate projection, because sometimes we have unrealistic standards of ourselves on or others. You know, Linda
Yes.
Behrens talks about the be like me syndrome. We want people sometimes to be more like us. Let's say you have a super responsible ISTJ, and then they're wondering, why didn't this ENFP keep their word? And so sometimes we want people to be more like us. Or sometimes there's be like them. So sometimes we're like, oh, maybe I should be more like them because I'll fit in more. You know, if you're in a very SE culture or SE SF that values beauty, values valuing things in the physical world, and you're a person who values information more than physical form beauty, then you can be either bending yourself in a way that's unnatural and you might be kind of not working with your natural strengths, or I mean, you might grow in a healthy way through incorporating different parts of your personality, but that's individuation and that's a different topic. And so oftentimes type learning about type helps us know when we can just not want other people to be more like us, and we realize the principle of the cost of specialization, where if you're good at one thing, then you're going to naturally be a little worse at another thing. For instance,
Yes.
if you are all in on your feeling functions, then by nature your thinking function will be a little smaller. That's why, you know, with ENFJs and ESFJs, when you have dominant extroverted feeling, the introverted thinking becomes smaller depending on how hard you put yourself into that FE. And so you realize that people aren't wrong, they're just specializing in different things, or they're using their brain in different ways.
Yeah, and I think along the lines of what Joyce has talked about, it helps with you finding the environment that suits you more as well. Like, you know, when it comes to careers or people, um, naturally we want to be around people who can appreciate us, and people and careers who can appreciate our strengths as well. So, for example, when you know your personality type, obviously you have to be like correctly typed and you have to answer the questions honestly, because one issue that I talked about in my previous video on how to prevent mistypes is you have to be very honest with yourself, because I see people when they're answering questions, obviously online test is not the most accurate, but people are not being honest sometimes when they test as a type that they aspire to be or that they perceive to be more accepted. Because I understand, because I have tested as an extrovert in the past, which is not accurate for myself. So it's like when we try to like get a certain answer that is more deemed acceptable or we think is better, then we would not be able to find what we are actually good at naturally. And the point of typology is to get the most accurate, the most like authentic reflection of who you are, so you can understand yourself. And for example, when you know that you use extroverted intuition, you would naturally gravitate towards job that requires more extroverted intuition, and that tends to be maybe in like a tech company, or I'm just like generalizing, like somewhere that needs innovation, or I don't know, like start up a business or whatever. Obviously, it has to be aligned with your own personal like passions as well, but you would not be trying to force fit yourself into a company or a group of people that you know would not value extroverted intuition that much, or you can feel the resistance. So I feel like it just like makes the progress faster, because sometimes as an individual you might be influenced by people around you, especially if you have extroverted feeling, it tends to influence you a lot. And you may think, oh, I have to do this because my friends are in this field. But then you realize that that's not where you want to be. And that's not where your natural strengths are. So if you are going in somewhere where it's not like your dominant hand, you're going to be hammered and you're not able to really self express. So that's going to be like a detour, basically. Yeah.
It's true. Sometimes we live lives for other people. So someone gives us a cookie cutter and we don't know any better, so we form our lives around the cookie cutters that other people give us. But what that can cause is that when you live trying to please like the world's cookie cutters, you start to become more and more dissatisfied with your life. And so that's what brings people to typology. They're like, I've been living life and it's very unsatisfying for me and I don't know why. And so I'm trying to figure out who I am so that I can not live in a way that makes me sad or depressed or lack of purpose or lack of fulfillment. And so type helps you figure out how you may be taking in information a little differently than other people. And so you can tailor the things in your life more for yourself. And it helps you set boundaries for things that may not be as in accordance with your preferences. And so if
Yeah.
you realize that you've been in a job that deals with a lot of details, but you're not a person who has SI in a valued way, then you're like, whoa, I gotta get another job. And so sometimes people
Mhm.
need that extra confirmation or that extra, wow, okay, now that gives me a reason and it gives me the permission to make a life change that I've already known that I should have made.
Yeah. And also, it's like, um, especially when the society you are in values a certain different functions. So I do realize that on a societal level, a lot of societies have a certain preference, and that's sad because people are not supposed to be, um, you know, trying to be a society's role, like model citizen or whatever. But unfortunately, every society sort of have that norm. So, for example, if you come from a society that values extroverted thinking, which is the society that I came from, you would realize that a lot of people value like salary and how much you earn, and more than anything else. And on the surface, that might be what people value, but if you sort of get influenced by that and you play their game, you will realize that if you're not a TE dominant, which ironically, actually, most people in a society are not TE dominants, because there's not that many ENTJs and ESTJs in the world. So most people are likely not to be fulfilled when they try to follow that model, but they still do it anyway because they are like pressured by teachers and parents and peers and to go into like banking jobs. And then they end up hating it, which is what I see from a lot of people that I know personally, who quit really high earning jobs. I know of this guy who quit like this really prestigious job because he just couldn't take it. Like it was basically he has to just keep working, and I don't think he has like time off on the weekends. I mean, it's a really high earning job, and it's great and everything, but it's not what he wants out of life. So then it doesn't last like the prestige and the number of hours. I mean, the number of like amounts in the salary doesn't really add up to what he likes. So in the end, it's all going to be short-lived. So that's like what happens when you are trying to go by a certain society's preferences or the preferences of people around you. It tends to not create fulfillment, and it's also similar with other functions. Like you said, if a society really values SE and you are pressured into a very extroverted job, or to act more extroverted, but that's like not you in person, truthfully, then you would feel really exhausted all the time, right? And there are actually people who do value introversion or traits with introversion, but because you are not able to hone in on your own strengths, then you end up overcompensating, and it doesn't look natural. Yeah.
Yeah. It helps you with your relationships in the sense that if you have a situation, for instance, where there's a person who's extremely extroverted, they're just all in with their extroverted function. Sometimes they can look at someone who's very introverted, like that's very heavy on their introverted functions, as a person that, oh, I just thought that you didn't think because you never said it out loud, because I always talk out loud, or I'm always doing things. So why isn't this person doing anything? And so they think that the introvert must have something wrong with them. It's like, well, maybe I'm thinking before I'm acting, and I'm not just going ahead and like doing the thing all the time. And I just want to think about it first. And so sometimes it can help us know when we're judging people and not giving them enough grace, because
Yes.
people walk through life all the time judging each other. It's just like judge, 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 judge.
Yeah.
So it's this tool to help us stay humble. Type is a humbling kind of tool. It helps us love people better. I see it as a model to help heal, to help love, to help care for others better. You can use type for whatever resource that you want. Type is like a needle or syringe. You can either use a syringe to inject life-saving fluid into someone and help them heal from a disease, or help them have a monumentous life, or like from healing them, or you can use a syringe to euthanize someone. So type is a tool that you use however you kind of want. It should be used for good, though, because there's so much good that it can give to the world.
Yeah, and also I want to like touch on the topic of stereotypes. I feel like there are ways where, personally, I think sometimes, obviously, like you said, it depends on how you use it, right? So typology can be revolutionary in a really positive way, but sometimes I feel like people are limiting the use of typology when it's like too limited to the stereotypes of each type, and using typology to make ourselves feel great. Like it's like, oh, I'm this type, so I must be like the most caring person, like, or I'm this type, so I must be like the most intelligent. I feel like that's kind of limiting the what type can do for a society. And even though we do learn that certain types we sort of have conflict more with, and obviously we do try to stay in the lane where we would be naturally more appreciated for our strength. But I think that when we do use type for acceptance, and we see people in that way, it actually doesn't really matter what's the type of the other person, because I have highlighted in one of my posts on my community like community post that I did have a family member who was an ESTJ, and he always fully accepted me for who I was. He never criticized me for being different from who he was, because the way he saw me was in that unconditional love state, because I was the family member. So it doesn't mean that because you're a different type and you have different strengths that you have to conflict. It's the conflict comes when we project, when we want the other person to be like us. So for example, you hear of parents like, oh, they maybe they wanted to be in a financial job, so they tell their children like, oh, I want you to be in this certain job as well. So that's when there is the lack of acceptance. It's not because they are different. Like if you are completely fine with your kid doing whatever job, then you are not going to have a problem. even if their job is totally different from yours. But the problem only comes if you want them to be doing the same job as you. So like same thing with type. Like it doesn't matter if you are ESTJ or INFJ. Like sure, maybe certain values differ, but if you are fine, totally fine with how they are, and they're fine with how you are, then there's no issue. But it's only a problem when you expect them to be how you are. And so I remember, like to illustrate this point further, I remember that when I was in school, we had this like a lot of activities that has to do with like extroversion, and there's like this, I don't know whether it's like a camp or whatever, and there's also a lot of ESFJs there. And I remember back then, there was a lot of judgment because ESFJs, being really extroverted, they couldn't understand why some people were not like participating in the activities with as much enthusiasm as they are. But in reality, I actually felt very uninterested in those activities, and I felt no ESFJs who have matured and they have a better appreciation of introversion, which I think comes from developing maybe their later functions like TI, and because they are more accepting of introverts in their lives, and so I actually communicate better with extroverts. I mean, with ESFJs now compared to in the past. So that's how typology can help you in a positive way, because they sort of already have an understanding based on their life experiences, and with this acceptance, you can get along. Yeah, it doesn't matter whether you are fundamentally different or not.
It's true. It helps you realize that it's okay to have different modes of operation. Let's look at this kind of scenario. There was this person, there was a funeral, and then there was this boy who he didn't cry during the funeral, so people thought that they murdered the person who died. But that wasn't the case. He's just neurologically different than everyone else, and so he just doesn't have that reflex to cry when other people are crying. And so now you're in the situation where this guy is trialed for murder and he didn't actually kill the person. Now, that's extreme, but this happens on a day-to-day basis with so many other things. We convict other people in our minds for just being different than us.
Mm-hmm.
And so type really helps us realize it's okay. Maybe your ISTJ dad. Okay, wait, no, I'm stereotyping. I was gonna.
It's a very Asian dad stereotype. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe, yeah. I was. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm not. I'm contributing poorly to the stereotyping, but
No,
let's
no.
say that your ISTJ dad wants you to be an accountant, but you don't want to be an accountant. Maybe you have a more artistic personality. Maybe type can give you that freedom to say, you know what, maybe he would like that job, but I would not like that job. So I'm going to go somewhere else. Sometimes,
Yeah. And imagine but if like everyone understands type, and obviously like ideally everyone is typed correctly, but I don't know in which universe. But like imagine if people all understand type and they know that the sun is INFP, and they would be totally fine with the sun becoming an artist, because it's such an INFP stereotype to become an artist. I mean, like maybe not totally okay, but they would be like way more understanding of why the sun is having like a strange pursuit or whatever.
yeah, sometimes we judge people because it's like, why do you struggle so much with that thing? Because it comes so easily to me. Why shouldn't you
Yes, a
have
classic
it?
projection,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
people
So,
are not us. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and it happens when people like there's a certain type that is like more dominant in terms of numbers, so they assume like, oh, everyone is like us because I'm so like at ease with this function. Like for example, SI, because I grew up with a lot of like people who use SI, so they're like, why are you so slow at getting this, or like some tiny detail, and I'm like, well, I mean, you are slow in other things that I'm good at, so it's just that it's not like universally as I guess as obvious. Like when I'm in, obviously in certain classes I'm like way faster at grasping like the abstract stuff. Like I'm always like contributing a lot in the English classes and history classes. So that's where like the intuitive function comes in. But when people know the different personalities, like I feel like they won't have such an unrealistic expectation of other people, like being like, oh, why are you so slow at this? Yeah.
Yeah, or you purposefully are being slow at this.
Oh
Because they're
yeah,
like,
that's
how
another
could
thing.
someone struggle with this is probably what goes through someone's mind. Like, this is so easy. How do you not know this? And
Yes,
so
TJs. Sorry, I have to bring this up again. I always talk about them, but you know what? Like some of my best family members are ESTJs, so not all ESTJs are like that judgmental. Obviously, it's because like also because in a family setting, like if you have like that's why I feel like acceptance and love can really cure judgment, because when you love someone that much, you like don't even care if they're doing things slowly or fast. But like in a non-relative setting, I do realize that, especially in a job setting, a lot of ESTJs have this projection. They're like, everyone should be good at what I'm good at. You know, like there's this really classic case. And I know so many stories of, I do have an ISFP friend who basically got like hammered on the regular. Like she was working in a cake shop, and yeah, she was like seen as really slow compared to like the ESTJ. And I don't know if you have heard of the song. There was also a song. Interestingly, I felt by this singer called Melanie Martinez. I think that's how you pronounce
yeah,
it.
I really like her.
Like I think she's an INFP, but anyway, some kind of,
I really think she's FI, so
yeah,
FI.
INFP in my opinion. And she had a song. It's really interesting. She had this song called, I think it was like called Bakery, or like set in a bakery. I can't remember exactly, but I went to look at the song lyrics, and it's about her working in a cake shop to fund her, like basically to fund her dreams of becoming a singer, because she wasn't a singer back then. And she got like hammered so badly by the manager for like not making the cakes in a certain way, or like not being fast enough. And I'm like, that's such a classic like INFP working in a TE dominant environment problem because they just don't. I don't know. I feel like it's so much easier in a job setting if you can sort of recruit people based on your strengths. Then you just cleverly like park them in a department that you know where they will excel the most. So then it actually increases the productivity of the company.
That's a really good strategy. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
so
it's like, yeah, imagine if maybe she's in charge of like making creative recipes of the cakes instead of baking the cake. This is just a really like on the spot example, but it's like maximizing the strength of whoever is there. Yeah.
it's true. Yeah. You can strategize better when you know about type, because then it
Exactly.
gives you an idea of where their strengths may be, and so you can work with them. You can use them as a TE resource to figure out where
Yes,
to best put them
exactly.
in a slot that they're the most
Yeah,
suited.
and then it's like, oh, this FE heavy person going to HR and help with like the HR department. Yeah, so I think that would be really interesting if people use that in a positive way. Again, like if people are like typed correctly. Yeah. Okay, so now we can talk about how I think we have briefly covered that, but we can talk about how understanding the cognitive functions especially can help societies to sort of see where the issues lie. So obviously, I gave an example just now already about TE heavy societies. For example, when you see that a certain society is really heavy on the TE, but obviously not every individual is a TE user or TE dominant. So naturally, having that pressure is going to have repercussions. And so when you do look at society from that lens, like you look at what the current sort of pressure to fit in comes from, you can pinpoint the ways that things have to be balanced out, because ultimately it's not that one function is wrong or right. It's that we need all of them. Like we need, as a society, we need variety. You can't have like everyone follow TE or everyone follow like NI or whatever. You need like different parts of society to be functioning really well with all the functions. So yeah, so I would like to know maybe from your society, which is Canada, what do you think is like the more like dominant function? I think you have mentioned it before, but like how type can help people to understand like the ways that they can balance things out.
Canada is a bit like a retirement home for nice people. So
Right. Like maybe FE,
yeah.
who's strong, yeah.
Yeah, because we don't have many natural disasters here. It's relatively safe and everyone's nice. They're known for saying sorry, and people here are very polite. It's very rare you meet a rude person unless you're in a place where it's downtown or somewhere. And so it is very FE, possibly SFJ.
Yeah. And I feel like, when you understand the personality of the place that you're in, like sometimes when you see that every function has its problem. So for example, with FE, sometimes you are not able to say what you truly want to say because you're afraid of like upsetting maybe the harmony of that like group. And sometimes it's hard to maybe for someone to express their TI opinions or even TE opinions because they may be seen as rude and too assertive, for example. So I feel like when people are aware, like on a collective level, it's not the pressure. It doesn't feel as great because they know that, oh, that's like the way that it is, but we can still do our part to like not play into it as much.
Yeah. And on some level, every culture has a bit of TE in it because there are a lot of success oriented cultures. It's very achievement oriented cultures, very Enneagram 3 cultures everywhere, no matter where
Yeah,
you go. Just because
that's
if
good.
a place has education and a place has, you need these credentials to succeed in life because you need to get a good job, you need to get good money, which is like the parents, how they hammer that into a lot of their children. There's a lot of TE expectations on almost everyone in the world.
Yeah, and the comparison of salaries, which is something I really do not like, especially as a person who don't use TE myself. Like, I get so annoyed by that. I mean, don't get me wrong, like I actually do care about like material comforts. Like I have my ways of earning money, so it's never an issue. But like I just really hate like the comparison within like, oh, how much salary do you make? Like it's like determines your worth, and how like it really doesn't matter that much as long as you're not like obviously not like being like purposely exploited and given really low salary, not talking about that. But I'm saying like beyond a certain point it ceases to matter that much. But like you said, there's the TE dominant culture in across nations, I think, in many situations. Yeah.
It's how the structure of money is set up. It's how the structure of society is set up, that you have to get a good job, and that's the elevator of life. Those are the life milestones people want you to meet. There are a lot of TE milestones that society expects you to meet, or you're a bum.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's a TE to a certain degree is good. So I'm just gonna speak up for TE a little bit in case like the dominant TE people feel hammered. It's good to have goals and to be driven and to have ambition, but it's also good to honor what is important to you, which is where FI comes in. So like with typology, the understanding of typology, you know how to balance yourself out, because if you realize you are going too much in the TE direction, which is all about like number games and trying to get that goal, and you realize you're like losing yourself, then you get back to FI, which is about introverted feeling. Like, how are you feeling right now? Like, what do you really want? It's all about like personal questions, like, sure, you can use TE to succeed. I think it's very useful. And in fact, I don't use TE consciously, but I do use SE to succeed, which is like another strong function. And I do believe in setting goals and all that important stuff. But I also think it's important to value like what you want at the end of the day. So I feel like, when people get too much in the TE and they look at FI, and it's really useful because FI is where the answer will lie. Yeah. Even if they're not a FI user, they can use FI consciously to achieve that, because it's about understanding like what makes you happy, and being honest about it.
It's true. So knowing about type knows where we're doubling down on certain things, and it helps us even ourselves out through the process of individuation. So we know that, hey, if you know that you're using TE too much and being a human doing instead of a human being, then it's a sign to check in with your FI and what matters to you, what you value, what you like, and what you should care about. So personal questions, so that you don't lose sight of why you're doing it all in the first place. And so it helps you not become one-sided. Type helps you become more even-sided. If my language today is weird, is whenever I record with Tori, it's always at 1 a.m. my time.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I'm always
It's a time difference problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I might say things that are a little unfiltered. The filter is kind of dead at 1 a.m.
Yeah, but it's fine. Like, I can totally understand what you're saying still, so it doesn't really affect my side of like perception. Yeah, and also we see like, with other functions as well, like NISE, for example. It's like, when are you going too far? Like, I feel like there's also this societal element of valuing too much SE, because we have like pop culture. Oh my god, I suddenly realized I have so much to talk about regarding this topic, because we have like Instagram culture, and it's very SE, like people are showing off like their gains and how great their bodies look. I mean, not like I have an issue with that, but it's like, is this truly what you yourself are valuing? Because from what I know, SE dominants are also not like 100%, obviously. Like, most people are not SE dominants. Like, why are we seeing so much SE behavior recently? I really think it's because of societal influence. Like, we have Instagram, we have influencer culture, we have a lot of this like, okay, not like superficial, but I would say like more like physical, emphasis, right? And obviously that's not what everyone values. Like, me as a NFJ, like, I do value SE to some degree, right? But I don't value it as much as an SE dominant would on a daily basis. Like, I don't want to use it as much as an SE would, as an SE dominant user would. So I think you have to be very aware of what you yourself actually do want, and not be pushed around by this like, oh, you have to be doing this and that. Because from what I see, a lot of this SE culture is very harmful on people's mental health. Like, you see the rise in casual relationships, for example, that a lot of people are not even happy with. Like, I know so many friends who are really unhappy, and they actually don't enjoy whatever they're doing, but they feel the need to, because it's like, oh, I have to like be this way because I'm young and people around me are doing that, and I have to like live it up. But like, if you don't enjoy that, then you're not living it up. And it's also the same with like parties and clubbing. Like, maybe you just don't like clubs that much. Like, I honestly don't really like clubs anymore. Like, I've been there. I mean, I do like the music sometimes, and I do like certain clubs like overseas, maybe if they are like having a special element of surprise. But I don't like the everyday like weekend clubs. So if that's not your thing, then don't go for it, just because there is like the SE pressure to like live it up and drink and like, it may not even be enjoyable for you. So
Yeah, so in a sense, type helps you with authenticity too. So it helps you get in touch with your FI no matter what type you are. And it's also a good way to get out of garbage can decision making. So what this is it's when people cause problems for themselves that don't actually exist. So we always there are a lot of times where we create problems out of nothing. And so sometimes there's nothing wrong with you as a person, but then you see that there are problems wrong with you because, oh, I see this wrong with me, or I don't like this. Whereas it wasn't a problem in the first place, but your mind made it a problem. And so type helps us learn when we accidentally diagnose the wrong things as problems when they're just things that are perfectly fine.
yeah, and I think it's you have to be very careful. Like, I mean, people have to be very careful about like wrong diagnosis. Like, there are certain things that are just normal within your type. So don't compare yourself with someone else. Like, for example, maybe like having a bit of like shyness in social setting is normal. Like, it's not as big of a deal. Like, sometimes people get a bit too hung up on like differences. Like, they think, oh, I have to be like super confident all the time in front of the crowd. But maybe it just means that you're not um like always you don't always have to be super confident in front of a crowd. Like, it doesn't mean that you have like social anxiety. Maybe you're just shy in certain situations, and that's perfectly normal. Obviously it doesn't mean that you just never work on yourself and you just like stay. I also think that people shouldn't limit themselves by type. Like, shouldn't like make excuses for bad behavior just because of type, because there are ways. Like, I think type is designed for you to balance yourself out and to work on yourself while accepting yourself, like you mentioned. Like, for example, if you're maybe an ESTP, you don't have to like justify bad decisions. Like, oh, I'm just weak at NI, so I'm just like going to make a bunch of decisions in the moment. That's how I am. I mean, sure, yeah, to a certain degree, that's true. Like, but at the same time, it's like as you grow, you would mature and develop your later functions, and that would help you to make better decisions. And with people with weak SE as well, it's like, oh, because I'm an INJ, oh, I have to be like at home all the time and never meet people. I don't believe in that. Like, I think that's limiting because it's like you have SE as well. Like, even if it's not your first function, it's SE is focused on the physical experiences in life and experiencing life to the fullest. And I totally believe in that as well. Maybe not in a way that SE dominance would like do the same things, but I do believe in um, trying my best to experience things that I want to experience in this life. So I think that shouldn't be discounted. People shouldn't be limiting themselves. Like, same with the feeling types. Like, you can totally develop your logical function, like thinking function. You don't have to be in an emotional mess all the time. Like, INFPs, I know like they have a stereotype of being like moody, and that's fine. Like, FI dominance, it's difficult to be an FI dominant, I understand, but it doesn't mean that you can't learn to use TE and become a more balanced individual. Like, you don't have to be like, oh, I'm an INFP, so I'm definitely going to be depressed, and that's like my norm, and I'm not going to do anything about it. Like, you can do something about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes people spend a lot of time going like, woe is me, and they don't actually kind of resolve the problem of one-sidedness. So something type is great at is once you find a diagnosis for why you do something, you're like, all right, now I don't have to spend time over obsessing over this. Now I can get into the SE and actually do something about it. And I take action or really act in the moment with it. And so type helps you get over the mourning phase of like, oh, I'm not good at this. And it's just like, now that I have a label, I can stop feeling bad about it and I can figure out how to make the best out of this. So once you have the ingredients for cake, now you can bake the cake. It's like, great.
Yeah. And I totally recommend, like I did in many other videos, but just for emphasis, like I totally recommend people hanging out with different types, don't just stay in your bubble, because I do believe that, we can improve, like obviously with like accepting of our own strengths and everything, like we are proud of who we are. But at the same time, we can also go on different adventures a little bit, We don't have to hang out with the same personality types all the time. And then get into an echo chamber and get really offended when other people do things differently. And I see that a lot, like um, also based on the societal discussion. Like I noticed, like in my college years, there's a lot of like feeling types tending to. I don't know why it's a trend. Back then, I hope maybe even now it is a trend. Like feeling types congregate with feeling types, and thinking types like congregate with thinking types, and they get like really offended by each other. And I'm like, well, you wouldn't be if you just balance out your feeling and thinking function. It's that simple. It's like all that argument, and it's only because you're not balancing the feeling and thinking function. And then you always have the feeling types being like, oh, you're like really rude and insensitive, and then the thinking types being like, feelings are not facts. Like you're just like too self-involved and self-absorbed in your feelings, and both are correct actually. Like in my experiences, both can be true at the same time. Like maybe the thinker is being very insensitive at unnecessary times and have to learn to be like more emotionally intelligent. And maybe the feeling type has to know when to detach from their feelings, because operating in your feeling zone all the time is really exhausting. Like I understand, because I have FE, and it's like if I'm on full FE mode, it's really, really tiring. And it's people pleasing, and I get influenced by other people's decisions and opinions, and I can't form my own. And sometimes you have to detach from that to look at situations objectively. And I feel like a lot of arguments are just because people are not, they're not seeing the other perspective. That's why actually there's no need for arguments, because all the functions have their own um, reason for being there.
Yeah, it goes back to the garbage can decision making. So trash in, trash out. It's creating problems that don't exist. So
Yeah.
type helps you not create problems that don't exist. So it's like, oh, you're a thinker, you're a feeler. Now you guys can stop fighting. Now you guys know why it's happening. You have this disagreement, and nobody is wrong, and nobody's exactly fully right either. You're
Mhm.
valid in your own ways, and so it gives you a holistic perspective on your arguments with other people or your disagreements, so that it can save marriages, save relationships, because that feeler and thinker can get along now that they know why they're fighting. It's like, okay, I was going to bite your head off, but now that I know why you do that, I'm more forgiving. So it's a tool for
Yeah.
forgiveness, for mercy. Yeah. And it's also, type is good for connection too. Type is great at creating a community, because you create deeper conversations when you can talk about a person's cognition with each other. And so, for instance, I've been fidgeting with this hairband,
Yeah.
and it's called a bungee band. And the
Okay.
reason why I own it is because someone in the type community, they're the creator of bungee bands. And so I would have never been connected to this human being if it weren't for the type community making it so. So there are these wonderful minds within this community where you can bond over like your cognition, your mental landscape, who you are in on a very abstract core level. But you can also bond in the sense like you meet people with the strangest talents, or like the most awesome businesses that you would not, or the most awesome anything that you would have not met if you have not been in the tech community. We have the best and quirkiest souls here.
Yeah. And I think like there is like diversity of types. Like I totally believe in diversity of type. Like um people should learn to respect each other's differences, and also know like there is value in every single function. And so when you understand that, there is very little need for like really big conflicts, because when you look at like society, how how the bigger conflicts result, like on a bigger scale, like there's wars, and there's like people fighting over politics and all that. That's like the bigger scale. But like the bigger scale stem from like the smaller scale, because people have to, get along with each other daily in order for the change to happen. So I used to think like, oh, we can make the change by immediately tackling like the big issues, but it's like, really, unless you are like a congressman, you're probably not able to do that. I mean, unless you are like a president of some country, major country, you're not going to be able to directly tackle those big issues. I mean, sure, you can post on social media and everything, but in my experience, it's not a very direct impact. And the more direct impact we make is by what we do individually on a daily basis. Like, how do we resolve conflicts with other people that are different or have different strengths from us? And maybe there is validity in their strengths as well. Like, we get to sort of mix around with that. And that can then help the whole society rather than the other way around, which is like, to me, it's really like not as productive because you're not changing yourself in the process.
Yeah. Type is beautiful too because it's a constant learning that you are participating in. Like something that keeps people happy is growth, and type helps you grow in the sense that this theory has been evolving for a very long time. Carl Jung actually initially started with 8 types. So there is the FE dominance, the SE dominance, and then Isabel Briggs Myers was the one to create 16 types. And so yeah. So
Wow, so NI dominance didn't exist in the Carl Jung world.
NI dominance, yeah, there was no INFJ, no INTJ, just the NI DOMs. He grouped all of them together, kind of.
Okay, I see. Okay. Or at least I exist. I mean, like under his system. I thought like there was only FE and SE. That would be a chaotic world, like with just FE and SE dominance.
Yeah, so Carl Jung actually, he didn't really create types. He was just like, I see people who have NI, and I see people who are TI, and then they struggle with, So Carl Jung, he had the first version of type, and then it was Isabel Briggs. So it went from 8 to 16, and we're still evolving type as we're all talking about it together. And so we're all growing together. So this is a mutual journey of transformation between all of us. It's almost like we're all helping each other become butterflies. We're all in our cocoon, and we're growing together, and we're blossoming into something bigger together. We're becoming something beautiful.
Yeah, I always hear a lot of metaphorical talk from you, which is very typical of our personality types. Yeah, that's why we strive in like, I mean, at least for me, I noticed that we strive in like language and things related to language. Yeah. So I think also a last example to illustrate this, I think we don't take things as personally when we use type to understand people. Like, with ESTJs, for example, or ESFJs, and maybe in the past I also used to be a little judgmental of them. Like, oh, why do they do this? Or why are they so loud? And I'm like, yeah, this is because of their personality type. It's not like a personal problem, Like sometimes you get like a certain behavior that you deem as negative, but it's like, oh, that's actually how they behave towards everyone. Because now I don't take things ESTJs say personally anymore, because like that's just how they behave. It's not like they are doing it to you, And with INTJs as well, it's like I used to be like, oh my god, I had an INTJ roommate many years back, and I was like, how come we can't do like the FE thing? I mean, obviously I didn't know about FE. I just thought like, how come we didn't do like the warm and friendly roommate stuff together? And then now I'm like, I'm totally fine with INTJs doing that like normal behavior, because I understand they don't use FE. So that's not going to be like an overflow of like warmth. I mean, they do have the FI warmth, which I've learned to appreciate as well. But I don't expect them to be like, hi, like really friendly from the beginning. Yeah. So I understand that that's just the way they are, and I don't take it like, oh, I'm hurt because you didn't use the FE, you know. So I think that that helps as well when we are accepting and we are not personally offended or affected by their behavior.
Yeah, it helps us accept the diversity of human beings. So, if you truly value diversity, personality diversity is one of the hugest things to exist that goes
Yeah,
overlooked.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
so it helps you really, there's Black Lives Matter these days, and it's about you gotta appreciate diversity of skin color.
yeah,
And
and also the what is it called, the oh my god, my own race, no Asian hates. Wait, stop Asian hate. Sorry, my mind was just a bit, yeah. Stop Asian hate. Yeah, definitely that too.
yeah, so personality theory is a movement to consider personality diversity more seriously. So it's like no personality hate. That's the like personalities matter kind of movement.
All personalities matter. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and
and it's true.
yeah,
It's
and
important.
mhm.
A lot of
And I
hate in
think
the
it's,
world is from personality differences.
yeah, more than anything else. And I think, okay, not more than anything else, but it definitely is a very huge part of it, because personality influence perspective. It influence how we think about certain things. And sometimes, I see, that's why I see a lot of online battles, a lot of this like social media battles. I'm like, it's just this ENFJ being offended by this INTJ again. And it's like, yeah, because one of them don't use FE and the other one doesn't use, I don't know, TE or something. Like they are not looking at the same issue with the same perspective. That's why they're arguing, but it doesn't mean that actually there can be a lot of learning gained from this, from different perspectives of, obviously, an INTJ, when they look at a world issue, they're going to have different ways of looking at things. They're going to adopt the T perspective. They're going to look at the statistics. They're going to compare and contrast and see whether it makes sense. And sometimes maybe the FE user doesn't do that as much, and that offends the INTJ. And maybe the FE user is offended the INTJ, doesn't seem very sensitive about certain things. But it's like, because of your differences, that's why you bring value, right? Like you need different strengths, so to balance things out in the world. Yeah, and I think it just, like you say, it just helps so much. Like when people know it on a core level, not just for the sake of like validating themselves, but like from an understanding perspective, it's so useful.
Yeah, we're constantly sending each other mixed signals and we never know why. It's like, why is that person not receiving the signal that I wanted them to receive in the way that I wanted them to receive it? And then we realize, oh, the reason why they missed our signal was because they don't have FE, or I'm not communicating this in a TE way. And so we're constantly radio waves, sending each other messages, and we're wondering why, hey, why are you not getting my radio wave? Or why are you sending me that wave? You must not like, and then we take it personally or something. And so it gives us a name to why we constantly feel like the other person isn't getting the lingo or getting the message.
Yeah. And I think lastly, we have to like obviously be cautious of not being like too attached to our own type strengths. Like obviously strengths are great and everything, but there's like a healthy version and an unhealthy version. Like when people are too hung up, I feel like, on their dominant functions, and they neglect like their, tertiary and inferior functions. I think that's sometimes causes a lot of issues in both their lives and the people's other people's lives, because they're not balanced. So it's like really chaotic because you can't rely on like one function to survive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if the reason why people take it personally when these situations happen is because maybe they feel lonely inside, that their perspective isn't being heard or listened to. And so they're like, oh, you must purposefully want to make me feel lonely, or you must purposefully want to make me feel offended, or you must purposefully want to make this harder than it could be. Whereas the other person is not purposefully doing anything in that kind of malicious way. So instead of interpreting things in a lens of maliciousness, we can interpret it in a lens of ignorance. It's like, oh, they didn't mean to do that. It was by accident.
Yeah. And I think we can also like use our functions to sort of be more aware of when we are reacting in certain ways. So for example, I know that when I was younger, the way I used SE wasn't healthy. So now I can like observe it. I'm like, are you being too reckless in that situation? Because SE for an inferior SE sometimes is very out of control because it's not fully developed. So sometimes it strikes out randomly and then it goes back. It's weird. So I'm like, now I'm like thinking back, I'm like, yeah, I'm actually using SE and it's not in a healthy way. So you can sort of like observe and know what are the strengths and weaknesses of your functions. So for example, for FI users as well, like they can know when they are using too much FI. And I know a lot of FI users tend to overthink. They tend to be very personally offended when things are not personal because FI has that effect of like looking at things from a personal perspective. Like it's very subjective. It's like I feel this way about this, and so so they can be more aware that, oh, this is my FI doing its thing. So they're not like controlled by their functions. Because sometimes we are controlled by our functions, and that's also really bad. Like
Yeah.
with every single function, it's the same. Like with FE, maybe you're controlled by other people's feelings or opinions, and with like NI, you are too like unable to stay present. You're like always thinking of something else in a different. You're not like focusing on what you have right now. And I think when people are aware when they are doing these things, then they can be like not so attached to how they are doing right now.
You can catch yourself more quickly when you fall into old patterns or old habits. And so, oh, this is the NI grip, or oh, this is the TE grip. You notice it
Yeah.
faster.
Yeah, and then you are like maybe you're a T user and you catch yourself being like too critical of people, or like and every function has like its vices as well. So it's like it helps us to be more aware of when we are doing things unconsciously.
Mm-hmm. It makes you more conscious. It makes you more aware. It's another model to make you a more aware person, that you're not just on autopilot all the time, but you can look at yourself and how you live your life in a more self-examining way. So you're not constantly just going off of first impulse, but you get to choose your destiny in some sort of way by being able to, when you know that you're in. So okay, let me put this in a different way. So with type, people sometimes say, oh, I don't want something that puts me in a box. But that's not true. Type doesn't put you in a box. It just tells you the box that you're already in. And so it's like, now that you know you're in the box, you can escape it. And
Yes.
so type is like, this is the common patterns of this type. And now you know the patterns that you typically play into. Now you can go beyond it. You can
Yes.
almost,
So true.
yeah, let's say you're in a TV show and like The Flash or something, and with this character they can travel back into time. But now that you know how the future is going to be, now you can change the future. And so the same is with type. Now that you know that you play into familiar patterns, now you can be more aware and you can go beyond it. But you can't go beyond it until you recognize and acknowledge the patterns in the first place, and type gives you a dialect.
Yeah, and I think how we see our type, we have to sort of it's hard not to be attached to our type, but we have to sort of like see our type in a neutral way almost. Like yes, we are very accepting of our own strengths and we celebrate it, but at the same time we know that there may be certain things we do that are typical like pitfalls, and it's like the same way we look at our enneagram. Yeah, so we know like where we can do things differently.
Yeah. And type is a tool to understand the universe too. So it's almost like the universe in a tool set, or the universe in a theory. So you're taking all of that and it's bringing all of these beautiful concepts of humanity and people into this very simple to use roadmap. And so it's beautiful. It's human nature, God's design, if you're religious, all packed into, you can examine it through this tool. You can examine the beauty of the universe, the beauty of your divine design through that tool. And so I find type is beautiful because it helps you understand your divine design in more clarity, and you can acknowledge the beauty that exists within you.
Yeah, and it's like you say, it simplifies it. It makes it easier for you to understand, because like if it's like too, I think it's already simplified enough. I think people should all look into functions, and like don't just stay at the letters part of it. The functions is where the fun is really, and where you can.
That's
really
why it's called functions. It's fun, fun.
Yeah, and I really think that it has the potential to be. I mean, it is revolutionary, and I think I wish, like I know there are companies who are already tapping into anagram types and MBTI for hiring, but obviously like there's problems in the online tests as well. So I think as time goes on, it would be more and more streamlined and fine-tuned and all that. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thank you, Joyce, for joining this talk. I think it's really insightful, and I learned a lot. And I hope that with our discussions, that more people become aware of their functions and their personality types and how to relate to other personalities in this world and their society. Yeah. Thank you once again, and remember to like and subscribe and share this video if you enjoyed it. And we will see you in the next one. Bye.
Bye.